swag out there and bow.
What's going on, everybody? It's Web Style, the man, the voice, the fragrance, and we are here with someone who I am excited to talk to. If you've watched any of my videos, you know I am a humongous sci-fi head, blerd, what have you, and I'm so gracious and so happy to talk to Rod Faulkner, who is the host of the EYE on Sci-Fi podcast. Rod, how are you today?
I am great. Thanks for having me, man. I'm
Thank you for being
excited to
here.
be on.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I have a question for you, and this is something that I think is even more important for us sci-fi geeks, blurs of color. What got you into sci-fi?
I'm going to date myself because I am in my early 50s. So, growing up for me, I was born in 69. So, my formative years growing up was in the 70s and 80s. And at that time in the late 70s, Star Trek, the original series, was in syndication in reruns. And I remember as a 7, 8, 9-year-old boy watching the original series, and it was Nichelle Nichols. Her iconic portrayal as Uhura was something I had never seen, and it blew my little mind. And just seeing this gorgeous, competent, accomplished Black woman on a sci-fi series,
Right.
and she wasn't a menial, she wasn't a prostitute, she wasn't a maid, she was a member of the command staff of a spaceship. And my love for Star Trek was galvanized at that moment, and I've loved it ever since.
You know, it's interesting. My story's similar, except I'm a little bit younger. I just turned 45, but
Mhm.
late 70s, early 80s, it was Star Trek, especially in syndication, and more so because of my mom. My
Yeah.
mom loved it. I watched it. That's pretty much where my sci-fi horror roots come from, because it's all my mom's fault. She had some of the things I watched as a kid, especially horror. I'm like, how did you let me watch this? Uh, but like my earliest years, it's interesting. I was thinking the other day, like I remember the movies I saw in the theater, and for the most part, like I remember watching E.T. I remember crying. I
Mhm.
remember seeing Return of the Jedi in the theater as a kid. All these things as a family. I remember being taken to see The Dark Crystal by like all of these sci-fi fantasy
Yes.
sort of films, and so that's I some degree I'm not surprised, because that's Star Trek is weird. Star Trek for me, I didn't get the umph on Nichelle Nichols at that point in time. I think good, I'm a little bit younger, so TV was a little bit more integrated. I wouldn't
Mhm.
say a whole lot more integrated in that regard, especially my mom was a Spock guy, so that was all I ever heard from her. That Mr. Spock. But for me, being steeped in Star Trek, I wanted to learn more, so I read, and then obviously I was what Next Gen was 87.
It
So I
was
was
87.
yeah, so I was 9. So that's like that was my Star Trek,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I'm gonna tell you
really.
something that's
Yeah.
interesting. We seem to have a similar origin story
Mhm.
because I was a little bit older because in 87 I started my freshman year of college, the fall that Next Generation debuted.
Mhm.
And let me tell you something, on that campus, in the dorm room lounge, that one TV, we would all gather around, all the sci-fi heads, and watch it every week, and we were blown away. So Nichelle Nichols really ignited my love, not only of Star Trek, but of science fiction. But Star Trek: The Next Generation is my Star Trek.
Yeah, same. Now, let me ask you this though, because this is something that we have we have we as blurs or nerds of color have always faced, is that how did you come to accept what you are? Because you got to think really in those of you who may not understand,
Mhm.
we in the Black community, especially growing up in that point in time, we were not looked upon as being cool. We were picked on. Look, no matter what you say,
Yes.
if like they found out you like anything sort of geeky sci-fi, like you were weird. You
Yeah.
were um you were some words that I'm not going to say right now. You know
Well,
exactly what I'm
I
talking about.
concur. Now, in my experience, my mother, I got my love of reading from my mom and my grandmother.
Mhm.
But my mother does not like sci-fi. She doesn't like horror, none of that. It just does not work for her. But just for me, it was something about science fiction and fantasy ignited my imagination
Right.
because I started off reading. My grandfather used to give me comic books. And so I'm also a comic book lover. And then I started reading fantasy novels like my favorite is The Chronicles of Narnia. That's the one I started with. But then I didn't read Lord of the Rings, but just a lot of sci-fi fantasy was really my jam growing up. And you know that in the 70s, we didn't have a lot of sci-fi because it was still really looked down upon in pop culture. Like, oh, that's for children, that's for kids. And in the Black community, loving comic books, loving science fiction, it really was not that accepted.
Right.
You know, the parents were like, I remember my mom had a conversation with a girlfriend of hers, and I remember she was saying, well, you know, at least that myself and my friend of mine at my time, we both love comic books. And they were like, well, at least they're not into drugs.
Right, exactly.
So as to what you were saying,
Yeah.
that speaks to that. But, you know, I was always kind of the outcast because I never really was interested in sports. So I wasn't that athletic. And I was bullied a lot. And I was also overweight as a kid, too. You know, they used to call it husky.
Right.
So that was me. So I had all that combination. And so I really retreated into the world of fantasy and science fiction a lot. And it really didn't bother me, you know, the peer pressure, because I wasn't part of those cliques anyway. So it didn't bother me. When I got to college, you know how you naturally are attracted to your tribe.
Yeah.
So all of my closest friends that I still have to this day, we all love sci-fi. We all love reading fantasy and science fiction. And so we would hang out, and that was my group. So I never really did have a problem, but you know, there wasn't a label, and definitely nerd culture wasn't popular, not back in those days like it is now.
Right. Okay. Understood. Now, let me ask you about Eye on Sci-Fi. What prompted you to start the podcast?
Okay. Let me see if I can kind of condense this. Actually, my story starts in 2013. Um, I used to know a guy, and he had a sci-fi podcast. It's now defunct, but we became acquaintances online. And at that time, I used to go onto YouTube and Vimeo and find, just by happenstance, these sci-fi short films by independent filmmakers that would be on YouTube, and nobody was talking about these. So I would talk about it with this gentleman, and he said one day, Rod, you know what, you need to start a website. And I said, you know what, that sounds like a good idea. So I started The Seventh Matrix, and my all-time favorite sci-fi film is The Matrix from 1999.
Okay.
And my favorite number is 7. So I combined the two because I didn't want to name the blog something generic like sci-fi fantasy short film blog. But The Seventh Matrix, I thought, had a ring to it. In 2018, I thought, you know what, a natural evolution of my mission with The Seventh Matrix is to start a podcast. And on The Seventh Matrix, what I would do is find these science fiction and fantasy short films that I liked, that I thought other fans would enjoy. I would curate them and put them on the site. The podcast, I just share my opinions of these short films and where they can be found. And it has kind of grown since then to now I've interviewed filmmakers, directors, and other creators who work in the speculative space. So it's been really fulfilling and a lot of fun.
Okay. I definitely understand the podcast growing out of the website. That is a natural evolution. That's how I got to where I am.
Yeah.
Out of the website. Now, one of the things, and we didn't really talk or kind of interface with you in TikTok. I know that you are a very big fan of Babylon 5, especially with the new animated movie. One of the things about Babylon 5, and I think you touched on this so much when you were talking about it that day on TikTok, is that it is such a unique sci-fi show in that it literally has like seeds that are sown in the very first episodes that go all the way through 5 seasons, if I remember correctly.
5 seasons.
In Babylon, I always tell people I missed out on a lot of stuff, or I missed out on a lot, but a lot of things were not shown in a normal order or functionality when I went to college, simply because it was like, we didn't have cable when I went to school, and
Right.
the affiliates on the Eastern Shore weren't good about, it was like maybe 2 or 3 stations, if that's,
At
in
best.
the dark days. And they show Voyager like 1 o'clock on Saturdays. As I told people, like, I missed out on like a lot of Voyager, a lot of Deep Space Nine my freshman year and onward, because they just didn't show it like that. And it's not like I can go buy DVD or go streaming anywhere at the time.
Right. That didn't exist.
Right. So Babylon 5 was one of the shows I got into. I believe, what was
Mhm.
the Action Pack is what it was part of, when they had that fake night
Yeah, I
show,
remember the
and the
PT
Vanity.
something network, PTN network or something. It was
Yes.
like that in syndication.
It had the Vanishing Sun, and like the only 2 shows that went to series were Babylon 5 and Vanishing Sun, which was a good show that nobody talks about.
Mhm.
But Babylon 5 was just it was so complex. And I think one of the things back in the day I really hated is that unjust comparison with Deep Space Nine because of a damn wormhole. I'm
Right.
like, these 2 shows are totally different, and wormholes are not exactly a new phenomenon when it comes to science fiction.
Exactly. And I remember those debates, and I thought that they were groundless and unfair to both of the shows.
Yes.
Babylon 5 actually was conceived first and it went
Right.
to air first, but it was completely different. The
Right.
only similarity was that both had a space station
Right.
at the core. But other
Right.
than that, they were completely different. And I remember the first season of Babylon 5, my friends and I watched it, and it was rough. They were really getting their sea legs together. The actors were trying to find the
Right.
characters and all of that. But after that second season, it took off. And it was always designed to go 5 seasons. It was designed to be a novel,
Right.
highly serialized before that was the thing on television. And you're right. As a matter of fact, I'm part of a new podcast called Voices in Hyperspace. And we are rewatching Babylon 5 from the beginning. And there were seeds sown in the second episode of the first season that pay
Mhm.
off several seasons later. Just tremendous writing by J. Michael Straczynski.
Yeah, I always say that he gets his due from us, but I think just at large, people are really unaware of his genius in many respects, as far as what he's created and how good of a writer he is. And I think I didn't even
Agreed.
know who he was
Hmm.
until his Spider-Man run a while back, and that's when I got like, obviously I was introduced to his writing with Babylon 5, but I wasn't into the showrunners of who did this and who did that back then.
Right.
But seeing that Spider-Man run he did, that got me really loving to love his writing. And
Mhm.
then going back and watching Babylon 5, I'm like, I see it now. I understand this and whatnot. And I think you talk about going from I think for me, one of the biggest loops I got thrown um was when Sheridan left. Let me know. Who was the first commander?
Uh, the first commander was, why am I blanking? Michael O'Hare is the actor.
Yes.
Commander, that's going to bother me. But Sheridan came in,
Yeah, Bruce
and I'm
Bossman.
going to speak
Yeah.
on why that was a trend. There was a really concrete reason why they made that transition. Oh, Sinclair.
Okay, thank you.
Sinclair.
Yeah.
The reason that there was a switch over
Mhm.
is, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off,
go ahead.
but it came out just recently. Straczynski revealed that because Michael O'Hare, as well as a lot of that original cast, are no longer with us,
Right.
he suffered from mental health issues
Mm.
that really became a problem due to the stress of being the lead on the show. And so he was asked to be let go while he went to deal with that. And so that's when they brought in Bruce Boxleitner. And that's why there was a transition. And later on, evidently, I think that fortunately he had recovered enough that they were able to reintegrate his character back into the
Right.
show. Because when we watched it, we all thought, well, what happened to Sinclair
Right.
when the second season kicked off? Who is this new guy?
Right.
And that's why.
Okay. I guess I never knew that. That's interesting. But this is one of the things about B5 that I was going with. It was so jarring.
Hmm.
I think for me, Michael O'Hare, he is an actor I'd never seen before. So it was very easy for me to really get into Sinclair.
Right.
But Box Lightning is an actor who had been around for a while, especially in the 80s. You know, we'd seen him in so
Scarecrow
many
and Mrs.
things.
King, yeah.
Right. Scarecrow and Mrs. King, exactly. So, and that's what I remember him from at that time. So, for me, it took some time to get used to him and seeing him in this sci-fi sort of role. He killed it. I mean, at the end of the day, and I think, and this is where I will equate, or you kind of, equate Babylon 5 and DS9. If the leads were not as strong as they were, the whole series would have crumbled. And I think that was because especially Box Lightning and Sheridan, he oh, what's her name?
Dylan.
Yes, thank you.
Hmm.
That whole the dynamic with him and Delenn and how that really
Yes.
really went, how Garibaldi played off of him, Ivanova played off of him. If he was not the commander that he was, their characters would not have been as believable or as relatable, in my opinion.
I think that they made a good choice with Boxleitner.
Yes.
It was jarring for me, but it wasn't quite as jarring because I did like him as an actor.
Right.
It took me a while. I had the reverse problem. When its show started, I found O'Hare at first to be kind of wooden. And it was really hard for me but I gradually did warm up to him. And then, of course, they made the changeover. And at the time, no one knew why. But with Boxleitner, I do agree. Now, I do think part of the key to why Babylon 5 was so good is the writing in that cast.
Yes.
That entire cast was excellent. Mira Furlan as Delenn and Andreas Katsulas as Katsoulis rather as Jakar. And think about it that he had to give a convincing performance and all that makeup. Peter Jurassic as Londo. I like their interplay. So those relationships were fantastic.
Their relationship, especially how it evolved over those seasons, was just really amazing. Like, if you want to look up frenemies in the dictionary, that's who you would have next to it.
I wholeheartedly agree. In the first season, what I really enjoyed is that Straczynski was really sly because he made Shakar in the first season seem like he would be the antagonist.
Right.
He was very unsympathetic. And Londo was kind of portrayed as, even though he was always a political animal, he was more portrayed in that first season as this blusterous kind of, posturing buffoon in a way. And the way that every character, but especially like you said with Jakar and Lando, everyone's character evolved by the end of the series. But those two, they really went through an evolution. And also Veer, Stephen First, because you would think, oh, here's the comic relief. But he's given a lot of depth and he goes through his own journey.
I think that you bring up Stephen First. I think that role, and I had seen Animal House, and that was really the only thing I knew him from at the time. That
Same here.
Role gave me so much, even as a youngster, so much respect for him as an actor. To see, I remember this kid from Animal House. Well, he wasn't a kid. I was a kid, but this guy from Animal House. And then to see him in his role and to see the evolution of that role over the years, I really gained a lot of respect for his acting ability, because I think that, especially when you're known for one particular role in genre, and I know he's done other things as well, but it's one of those things where to see him really grow and transition as an actor. And wasn't Bill Mummy on the show at one point in time?
Yes, he was Ambassador Delenn's, I guess they would call him attaché, Lanier. Yeah, he was on there too. So all of those actors gave tremendous performances. And I agree about Stephen First. It's difficult to pull off a comedic character. It's easy to do drama. It's very difficult to do comedy. And he handled that role well. And then again, it goes back to Straczynski's writing. He really avoids a lot of tropes in terms of character development. And he puts his characters through a lot. And by the time they end up in places you wouldn't expect. Like Garibaldi ends up in a place you would never have thought by watching the first season of this guy. So, yeah, the show really is a journey, and I love the fact that it is a complete story. It
Yeah.
has a definitive beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one of those things where I'm glad that that's something you don't see in television nowadays anymore.
Hmm.
Realistically, especially with the way our viewing habits have just totally changed, from binging to destination. Seasons are shorter, and realistically, you don't even know, regardless of how good your show is or how many people watch, you don't even know nowadays if you're going to get more than one season, or if they're
Right.
going to pull you, that show on Disney Plus, Crater,
Right. I
that
heard
got
about
pulled in
that they
7 weeks.
pulled it.
Like I did a reaction for Nerd Through the World, and when I saw it, I'm like, oh, that looks like a very interesting show. I want to sit down and watch it. I can't now
It's
because it's
gone.
gone. So I say that to say, you like, in this landscape now, you don't know what's going to happen with your show. So for a show to get 5 seasons, one,
Mhm.
was probably 16 plus episodes, if not, especially back then, and to be able to, as a creator, tell your story and then leave,
Yes.
that's amazing.
And it's so rare. And back then, they need to, well, I'm sure there have been documentaries done about the making of Babylon 5.
Mm.
There needs to be a definitive one commissioned because the show was on the verge of cancellation every season.
Right.
And one of the common complaints you hear from fans is that fifth season was so horrible. Well, the reason for that is because they thought that the fourth season was it. And it was written to be the conclusion, even
Right.
though it was always supposed to go for 5. Then it got a surprise renewal. And so that's why you have Tracy Scoggins on as Captain Elizabeth Lockley. And she talked
Right.
about how she got a lot of vitriol from fans, fan mail back then. We didn't
Right.
have the internet now because who is this new woman? Where's Ivanova? So she had to deal with that. And that's why that fifth season is weaker than the others. But that's because they didn't think that they would be back.
Right. Right. Understood. Now, we talked about B5. What are some other of your favorite sci-fi shows? Well, let's talk about movies. What are some of your favorite movies? You talked about The Matrix.
Sure. Um, let's see. Well, definitely the original Star Wars trilogy. And out of that trilogy, the Return of the Jedi is my favorite. I know most people say Empire, but I like the fact that Jedi revealed that the journey in that trilogy really wasn't about Luke. It was about Anakin Skywalker
Right.
and his redemption. Um, God, what else? You put me on the spot. The Matrix, I know I've already said that. Oh, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
Yes.
No matter how many times I rewatch that, I still get that same thrill. That is
Yes.
such a brilliantly produced film.
Yes.
Love it.
Yes.
Never get tired of it.
I was
Trying to
talking with
think of.
Navi about that during our
Oh
conversation.
yeah.
And just like, especially as an adult, I love
Hmm.
rewatching old sci-fi or things you loved as a kid, and you do it through that adult lens, and you're
Right.
looking and paying attention. Like, okay, case in point, I love horror movies. Um, the only horror movie that ever scared me as to death as a kid was Return of the Living Dead, and that is come to be again the things my mother let me watch as like 8 or 9 years old. But I've come to love that movie through
Hmm.
my early adult years. It's now in my local theater was showing it the other day. So I went to sit on the big screen for the first time.
Nice.
Loved it, but I'm paying attention and watching all of these little things in the movie that, one, I never paid attention to years ago the last time I watched it. But two, you don't really notice because you're watching on a small screen.
Right.
Seeing on the big screen, I'm able to pay attention to the graffiti, like what characters are doing in the background, and really have
Background.
a better understanding. And I'm saying that leading to specifically the Wrath of Khan. I was telling Navia, you realize that Kirk and Khan are never on the screen at the same time. The
Right.
acting that they did literally to blank screens was amazing. Especially that was 82?
Yeah.
That's something that's commonplace now, but it wasn't back then in 82.
Right. Right.
And just the pacing of that movie, it's only like 92 minutes, if I remember correctly, but it feels like it's 2 hours. Like
And it's so tense.
yes,
And
yeah, the tenseness of it. That's what makes it
yeah,
feels like it's so long. And it's such a beautiful science fiction film.
yeah, it's quite accomplished.
Yeah.
Now, I'm also too going to be a little bit controversial with other Star Trek fans, but I've always appreciated the motion picture. And the reason for it is really geeky from a production standpoint. A lot of people don't realize that the director of Star Trek The Motion Picture was Robert Wise. This man was responsible for films such as he directed the original West Side Story, he directed The Sound of Music, The Day the Earth Stood Still. He was no
Right.
joke. And part of the reason why that film had so many problems was they really didn't have a finished script. If it were not for, I think the smartest thing Paramount did was hire a man of his talent and caliber to direct it, because not only did he have to work around that, but then he also had to deal with certain egos. We can guess who, and
Mhm.
he was able to corral that. And when I look at it now, it really is a beautiful film. It's real ruminative. It's not, as fast paced as what we're used to,
Right.
but it's elegant.
I never paid attention to who directed. I think one of those
Mhm.
I've heard, but I never put The Day the Earth Stood Still and Star Trek the Motion Picture in the same category as far as same director. And
Yes.
now knowing that, I see that influence in my
Mhm.
head on that movie. I appreciate Star Trek the Motion Picture. I got it at Dollar Tree a couple months ago. It was like you just gotta buy it. It's there.
Yeah.
And I keep meaning to watch it on because they have the updated version on Paramount Plus, and I haven't because
Mhm.
one, I know it's a long movie.
Yeah.
So I don't have time. I don't get time to sit and watch like a 2 hour movie sometimes just by myself
Right.
anymore. But what I remember, I totally see that influence there, that directing, that style,
Mhm.
um, from that movie, obviously on a much larger budget in the 70s. So that makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah.
And I always say Star Trek the Motion Picture is that's like a pure sort of philosophical sci-fi movie,
Yes.
which was something you saw in the 70s a lot.
Hmm. You
You
did.
think what you had, even with the action, you still had Soylent Green and the sort of themes in there and a bunch of other movies from the
2001: The Space
yeah,
Odyssey, which is
2001
another favorite
exactly.
film of mine.
Right. So,
And
it fits in that mold of what came out during that time of highbrow science fiction. That's what Star Trek Motion Picture is to me.
right, I would agree. That's a good way to describe it. Let's see. One other favorite film of mine, because I mentioned The Matrix. It came out a year before The Matrix, but no one talks about it. And I really think that people need to see it, is Dark City. And
Oh,
it
that is
is
a
just as
amazing
mind
movie.
bending
Oh
as The
man.
Matrix. Why
Yeah.
that didn't hit, I have no idea, but that
I've
is a
watched that so many
fantastic film.
times. Yeah. Alex Proyas. Yes.
Yeah. And it goes in directions you would never think of.
Yes. 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 Mr. Hand. Yes. That is such an underrated movie that I
Very
don't
much.
understand why. Now, I'm gonna throw one out for you because you talk about that, and let me tell you because I brought up Bill Mummy before. Those that don't know, Bill Mummy was on the original Lost in Space.
Will
The,
Robinson.
yeah, yeah, the Lost in Space movie.
Now, which one?
The
Oh, the
the
one that
one,
came out in the
yeah,
90s?
yeah,
Yeah.
98 with Will Hurt.
Yeah.
Because you pull that up. That did Bullet Time before Matrix did Bullet Time.
It sure did. It sure, when they went into warp to go through yeah.
Yes,
I
I
enjoyed that movie. They
I
messed up
love
the
that movie.
ending.
Yeah,
The
the
ending,
ending.
they failed, but
Yeah, the
overall, the
whole
movie was good.
spider thing. Yeah, I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But
That's
other
when
than
it kind of
that,
went off the rails.
yeah. But outside of that, I saw it in the theater on the
Same.
DVD. That's one of those movies I don't think people talk about either because I think they just see it as a generic ripoff.
Yeah.
But they had some really good ideas from a thematic standpoint in that movie. It's just I think the ending just really killed a lot of people for just the actors. Gary Oldman was in everything back then.
He really
he
was.
he did not turn down a paycheck.
I don't blame him. I
Me,
don't blame him. Mimi Rogers was
yeah,
really good too as Maureen Robinson.
yes,
And from a production standpoint, I like the design of the robot. I like the
yes,
design of the ship. they really had a lot of promising elements in it. It's just that I think that for whatever reason, films usually fall apart in that third act, and that's what happened in Lost in Space. But I enjoyed the movie.
Yeah, me too. What Matt LeBlanc, not saying he's the greatest actor, but he was in it, and then even
He surprised me though. I thought he
yeah,
did a
yeah,
serviceable job.
me too. And even I look back at it now because I watched it not that long ago, but maybe last year or two.
Yeah.
Guy who played Morgan from Walking Dead is in the movie too.
Is he?
Yeah, yeah, he's the one that got lost. He was Matt LeBlanc's buddy, the fighter
I'm gonna
pilot.
have to go back and rewatch it then, because I didn't know that.
Yeah, I noticed. I'm like, wait a minute, that's Morgan. Like what? You know,
And
the
he's a
things you see
fantastic
from that.
actor.
Yeah, he really is. I forget. I don't know. His name escapes me. But what series are you watching right now?
Oh, wow. There have been some good ones. And I know that a lot of people don't have Apple TV Plus,
Mm,
but I do because I'm in the Apple ecosystem for my work and personal preference. I use a
mhm.
MacBook, I have an iPhone. It just works for me. So I
Right.
have Apple TV Plus, but they are producing some outstanding sci-fi series. Foundation. And what I love about Foundation, I didn't read the Asimov novels that the series is based on, but when I saw it, it looks amazing. And it has not one, but two Black women in the center of that show.
Mm,
I'm already down. And it, man, it will blow your mind if you ever get a chance to see it. And the second season starts this Thursday, I think.
right.
I'm going to tell you one that may surprise you. SEE.
Okay, the
Also,
one with Momoa.
yeah,
Yeah.
look, when I watched that, I got new respect for Momoa because he wasn't a favorite actor of mine. I thought he was kind of limited in his range. Look, I'm not afraid to eat crow. And in that movie, and the entire premise is unlike anything I have ever seen. And they executed well. And Alfred Woodard is in the first two seasons. That show kicks ass. And so many people are sleeping on it. I think because of Momoa.
Mm,
And then I just finished another Apple TV series. Plus is Silo.
okay, I've heard good things about that.
Oh, fantastic! And the production value, when you see it, you will go, "How the hell did they build this set? How did they do this?" It looks fantastic, and it is filled with intrigue. It's a mystery that keeps unfolding, layer by layer, from the first episode till the completion. It's been renewed for a second season, but with the writer's strike, who knows when that will go into production. I'm trying to think of what From, starring Harold Perrineau
Yeah,
from
MGM
Lost.
Plus. Yeah.
Yeah, that's, and you can, if you have Amazon Prime, the first season is available on Amazon Prime for all Prime members, and I
Okay.
encourage everyone to watch it. What I like about From is I'm not a big horror guy,
Hmm.
but for me, it's a sci-fi horror series that it does deliver on the horror, especially from that first scene from
Gotcha.
the, yeah, of the opening episode. And it's a mystery. You don't know what the hell is going on. And what I appreciate about it is that you are discovering more and more about this world that these characters are trapped in along with them. You're not given any advance information. So when they discover something, you discover something. And I think that's genius in drawing people into what is going on.
Right.
And Harold Perrineau gets a chance to shine because on Lost, I stopped watching Lost partly because of the way they sidelined his character.
I've heard about the issues that he had on Lost.
There's a book called Burn It Down by Maureen Ryan. Read it. It will
Okay.
change the way that you look at television because she talks about abusive sets and how Hollywood kind of disseminates the myth that in order to be a creative genius, you have to be an asshole. That's
Right.
not true. And it really goes into how it impacts hardworking people who work on these film and television productions. Fantastic book.
Sounds like the Josh Whedon syndrome.
Oh, read it. You would be surprised.
Yeah, I am. I haven't seen From, but one of the things I've heard is specifically outside of how good it is Harold Perrineau's performance. In that, I am glad to hear that because he is finally getting some due. Harold's a character or an actor or character actor that has been around for a very long time,
Forever.
and I think that and it's weird because I just remember back he was on that first season of Z Nation. I love
Right.
that zombie show. That was so quirky and cool. But
He's
just
been in everything.
exactly, that was the point. I was like, he's literally been in everything, and he's such a versatile actor. So and
Absolutely.
it's weird because I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about another actress and how she didn't like that person in this particular movie that they were in because they are like the same person in every movie and she just couldn't believe it.
Mhm.
Harold is kind of like that, but he fits. Like you can believe that he exists in this world, regardless of maybe I wouldn't say some of his characters because I loved him in Romeo and Juliet. I absolutely what Baz Luhrmann, love that movie. It's one of the best adaptations. But I loved him in that. I've loved him in everything. And seeing him in just I think I've seen like an episode or two online from. Uh, I hope he gets his just due. I don't know when Emmy season is, but hopefully there's enough buzz to at least get him nominated from everything I hear.
You know what? I really don't anymore subscribe to award shows. I
Mm,
really don't. Because it's really not about talent. And especially when you realize what goes on behind the scenes of all of these productions, it's really not.
right.
Um, and I don't, if he does get nominated, I'd be surprised because MGM Plus is a minor streamer. Not too many people are aware of it. And the people who vote for these nominations, when they nominate actors, they probably are not watching it. It could be he might get nominated, but even if he doesn't, I think that just we, the audience, know that he's finally getting his just due.
Right.
He is the central character, and it really is unlike any other character that he's ever played.
Mm.
So we'll see, but it has been renewed for a third season,
I've
and I'm
heard.
very hopefully nothing will change
Right.
and that they get a chance to produce it. But it is surprising. One more show. It is on Amazon Prime, and it really did surprise me. Another colleague of mine recommended it to me. It's called Peripheral, starring Chloe Grace Moretz.
I think
And
I'm familiar with this one.
if you get a chance, watch it. It surprises you because it looks like it's set in this real rural community, and you're
Hmm.
thinking, what is this? Because that's what I was thinking during the first episode. Why am I watching this house of sci-fi? And you think it's about a VR reality set.
Right.
But after I can't reveal any more to
Okay.
spoil it, but after that first episode, it goes in a mind-blowing direction. It is
Okay.
another show people are sleeping on. It's been renewed as well, but
I'm
it is fantastic.
I'm glad you said that because I think this is I've seen marketing for the show.
Hmm.
And the marketing, in my opinion, gives that generic VR sort of sci-fi premise. And I think that that is something a lot of shows
Hmm.
never find their audience because the marketing just sucks. And I know
So
you can't
bad.
reveal everything, but
Right.
when you make it seem like something that is not,
Right.
like for me, okay, a VR premise, I'm like, okay, looks cool, but how many times have you seen this?
Exactly.
Over the years, like why do I want to watch another? Because they have the other show on Amazon, what Upload or whatever it is. So again,
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
quite VR, but still digital consciousness. That's like, okay, why?
Why would I waste my time?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I was thinking during that first episode. I'm thinking, why did this guy recommend this show to me? I mean, Chloe Grace Moretz, the acting is great, but
Hmm.
this is set in a rural town, and she's a genius, but she's working for this VR company and playing
Right.
this VR game. What is this? But at the end of the episode, something happens, and you go, wait a minute. Wait, what's that now? And then the second episode, it takes off like a rocket, and it goes in a direction you cannot anticipate.
Mm,
And it's the advertising for it does it a disservice because people don't, they're like, we don't, what is this? I don't care
right.
about a VR show. I've seen so many of them. That's a trope that's tired. But no, Peripheral, watch it. You will not regret it.
Okay. All right. Peripheral. All right. So, what's coming up next for Eye on Sci-Fi? Any guests coming up? Any specific topics you're going to be talking about soon?
Well, I am going to be focusing on more Black sci-fi indie creators. I
Okay.
don't have any guests lined up, but the last guest I had on, a young man by the name of David Kirkman, he
Mhm.
is coming out with his first feature film.
Okay.
He created a viral Static Shock film that gained over a
I've seen
million.
that. Didn't he do an icon film as well?
He did.
Yes. Okay. I've seen both of those. Yes.
He's got an Afrofuturist film coming out, and I released a video with clips from our interview. He's very interesting and a very promising and exciting young Black filmmaker. And this film is called Underneath Children
Okay.
of the Sun, and it looks fantastic. So my main focus is indie sci-fi, really, in short films. So I'll
Mhm.
still be doing more of that. But whenever I see a filmmaker that I think needs to have more shine, then I will invite them on. So that's just really the focus of the podcast right now.
Okay, that's great. Well, Rod, I'm not going to hold you all night because we could probably say we ain't even touched Star Trek yet. We start talking Star Trek like Picard now, we might be here another hour or
Oh
so.
God, don't get me started.
Yeah. But Rod, thank you for your time. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Oh, sure. You know what? I got a central hub. If everyone will go to bio.site/EYE ON SCI-Fi all together. When you key that into your URL in your browser, that'll take you to where you can find my podcast episodes, my TikTok account. I'm on Instagram as well. And just also have merch. So all of that information is centrally located at the URL address. And that's bio.site/EYE ON SCI-Fi.
Thank you. I know all that's in the show notes if you're watching this on YouTube or wherever else. If you're end up listening to this on the podcast, it'll be in the show notes as well. So you can find it there as well. Thank you very much, Rod, for your time. You guys, thank you for joining. Thank you for your listening ear. Be safe and stay blessed.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.